Welcome back to POFO, Community for Justice. I'm Apostle Cecil Hatchett, and today is the 17th of 7/17/2016. And my show is going out over Hulu and going out over Netflix, over YouTube, And I want all you people out there in TV land to understand that I'm going to talk about the American drug war. Be one of the first clips I'm going to play, and it's a documentary. And I just want Negro, colored, black, African American, and all people to understand how America has used drugs to try and set up poor people, to put them in prison or to do illegal things, but to justify. We're talking about from the level of the CIA, FBI, the president, and I'm just talking about different people in the FBI and the CIA. And so specifically, a lot of people can be pointed out through this documentary, and I'll be playing several documentaries, but the first one I'm going to play is the one, the war, American drug war. And that's what I want you people out there to understand. So there's a lot of human beings being targeted, lives being destroyed, properties being lost, being illegally imprisoned, and for self-destroying themselves, because when you're using drugs, that's what you're doing. You're destroying yourself and being punished as if you're committing crimes that are looked upon like property crimes or crimes of on other people, when you're really destroying your own self. And these are ways to put you in prison to work for years for however long you've been incarcerated, or instead of getting you somewhere because you're sick and your body is sick and is in bad shape, that should have treatments for you to help you get your life under control and to get yourself rebalanced. But the evil things, what society does, is that in America, they just lock everybody up. And we build all these prisons to lock people up because there's great money in locking people up in prison. Billions of dollars are being spent to keep people incarcerated. And this country has played roles in promoting drugs and bringing drugs into this country illegally, but imposing those drugs on poor people, so that when you're poor, your life is destroyed, you're destroyed yourself personally until you can overcome your drug habit, or your loved ones are being lost to drugs or hurt or injured or committing crimes that get them hurt or injured or put in prison. So I'm bringing all this information to you, and I'll be playing another when I'm speaking about the 9/11, and they're talking about how the system did all people kind of wrong, or did them wrong, because 9/11, I played the 9/11 deception tapes and or movies, and those are documentaries, and that nobody's done nothing after some bin Laden, as if to treat him as if to give justification to kill millions of people. We killed over 3,000 people in the Twin Towers and the Building 7, which didn't have no one in it except for the two people, the black man that was killed and another gentleman, a white man, that was both trapped into the building. And when the black man spoke out about the explosion going off in the building, and made itself very visible to everybody shortly after he was murdered or killed, or as people try to whitewash it, say, well, he was killed, and the investigator that was working on his case decided to quit working on that case, and nothing else got done, so he wasn't heard about no more. So I'm just wanting you people out there to know, out there in TV land and cyberspace, we got evil things going on in America, and I just want all you people out there in TV land to know that. So not to be seeing it as something that's taken place and has passed. It's going on in 2016 to this very day. We got people that are people in high places, CIA, FBI, policemen, and various other things, got justification because you're making it felonies when you got marijuana in your possession. At one time, it would be a felony to have marijuana in your possession, and they gave police the right to shoot you, kill you, or treat you like you were some kind of a bank robber or somebody that had an arsenal of weapons when you went home to smoke. It would be for whatever reason, if they smelt it or had any belief that you had that on your person, they could go in there and kill you or hurt you or injure you. And I just want all you people to know that this has been going on because it's all about the money, locking you up, and then people confiscating your property, or if they treating you like you got your property or anything that you possess, or through illegal gains, they have a right to confiscate that and put you in prison for quite a while. The deal is putting you in prison because that justifies making you a felon, and so now you can't get a great job or a good job because the jobs working as a fireman or F.B.I. or a policeman or whatever, a convicted felon wouldn't be able to carry a firearm or things of this nature. So there's all kind of games that America plays to undermine America. I'm going to play this tape for you right now. The DVD is from by Hulu, and it's called American Injustice. So I'll get up and put that on. So if you could bring the camera over, put me on the other camera, 2, camera 3, they'd be able to see me. And I'm putting that on right now, so that's what I'm trying to bring it up right now. So all this stuff is very important, and I want you people out there in TV land to be aware of what's going on in your lives, or in your parents' lives, or grandparents' lives, or whoever do drugs or whatever they're doing.
Addictions. But the drug war creates black markets, creating an even more dangerous addiction for money.
Well, I became addicted to the money and also the power, too, I believe. You know, to be in charge and to have people look up to you and talk highly of you.
Big names like Freeway Rick going down. People actually want to be like him because they don't think about drugs, they just think about the money.
But what about those people whose lives are still affected by the Los Angeles crack epidemic?
Someone that wants to get in a program, someone that wants to get away from this lifestyle, easily can do it. Easily can do it. I mean, if they can just overcome the addiction.
Many people in Washington will tell you that the crack epidemic ended in the late 90s. But according to Sergeant Lou Daigle of the Los Angeles Police Department, crack sales are stronger than ever.
Basically, every gangbanger comes down here to make money.
Right.
Okay, they come down from the inner city, they come down from East LA, they come down from everywhere, all the different rival gangs, and very rarely, actually, is there a shooting between gang members.
Although Freeway Rick remains locked up, many people still blame him for crack's easy availability.
One time, I went over to this lady's house to drop her off some drugs, and it was the look that the little boy had in his eyes, you know, as if, man, you taking food out of our refrigerator. You know, we're not going to have anything to eat. And I thought about it, I said, man, I was putting him in the same position that I was running from. You know, I basically was running from poverty. That's basically how I got tied up in the drug business, because I never wanted to be a drug dealer, you know, when I was growing up. At one time, I even wanted to be a police officer or a firefighter.
I think the drug war is going to be lost. You can't win a drug war by prohibiting things that can be made in your bathroom with stuff bought from a grocery store.
Back when I was in college, we used to cross the Mexican border to buy pharmaceutical speed. We thought it was strong, but it was nothing compared to the crystal meth of today. Sergeant Daigle spots a man smoking meth out in plain sight. He may have been tweaking a little too hard to realize that he was using directly in front of the police headquarters.
What about the methamphetamine side?
Yes. Blackouts, psychosis, delusions, cutting my wrist, things like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Seeing things, demons and stuff.
Pretty realistic?
Very realistic.
Today, the DEA claims that crystal meth, or ice, is the new epidemic, replacing crack because of how long it lasts and how cheap it is.
Oh, meth is much better. Meth is, you get more energy, you can do more things, you can, it lasts longer.
Flying over the Mojave Desert, it's hard to imagine that a modern-day drug epidemic is taking place in rural white America. What are you in here for?
What am I in here for? I'm in here for possession of dangerous drugs.
Which was?
Which was methamphetamines.
Methamphetamines? Were you selling or just?
No, I'm just a drug addict.
Just a drug addict?
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, do you think being in here is helping your addiction?
Left, right.
coke habit, and I felt like methamphetamine saved my life, man, because I didn't have to use coke anymore. I fell asleep at the wheel pulling out of my parking lot of my house, and I woke up to the police being there. And underneath the seat of my car was 11 cents worth of methamphetamine, and they convicted me of that.
Phoenix, Arizona, a single man has created a kingdom from fighting meth and other illegal drugs. With 4 landslide victories under his belt, very few sheriffs have enjoyed the job security of Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
What is this, a documentary on drugs?
You either love him or hate him, and in Phoenix, if you hate him, you keep it to yourself.
Don't touch that, or it's electric, you'll die.
Oh, okay.
We don't screw around here. This isn't Texas. All right. The reason I'm the toughest because see these guys, right?
Yep.
Pink, where's your pink underwear?
I got them.
So see them. How come they're fading?
They don't got no new ones for me. I asked Mr. Offcials, they just don't got them.
Can we just start with you just like telling me your name and who you are?
I gotta tell you in front of these guys, they don't know who I am. Joe Arpaio, Maricopa County, Arizona Sheriff. This is the largest tent city in the United States, probably in the world. I would almost bet half of these guys are here for drugs. You see this? They can only mail postcards, did away with their envelopes, and on the postcard, that's me. We put the inmates in the dogs in the air-conditioned jail, and these guys are in the hot tents. It says that while inmates live in a hot desert tent city, rescue dogs live in air-conditioning comfort, right? Want me to sign this?
Yes, please.
Everywhere I go, I sign these things for these guys. I spent 32 years fighting drugs around the world. I was a director in Mexico, South America, had offices in Panama, worked with General Noriega, had offices in Argentina. I was the only federal agent in the Middle East. Now we have armies out there. My job in Turkey, I lived in Turkey, was to stop the French Connection. And we did stop the French Connection when I was a director in Mexico. We arrested the top guy in Asuncion.
Although he and his men still arrest people for crack, a newer drug has long since taken the lead.
We have a big methamphetamine problem right here. You can't blame Mexico for methamphetamine when we seize 50 laboratories right here in this county.
What is it about crystal meth?
Methamphetamine is easily made. You can make it anywhere in a motel room, in a car. That's one reason.
Methamphetamines, it's all chemicals, and it's the one that it's the epidemic of Arizona. I know that for sure. Of Phoenix and Mesa, Tempe, Chandler, all the surrounding areas. I know it's an epidemic here.
Is it a sign of the times that the newest drug can be cooked up from common substances found at hardware stores and pharmacies? During the 1920s prohibition of alcohol, bootleggers profited by cooking moonshine, a very dangerous homemade alcohol.
In Prohibition, the government forbade legal booze. People created moonshine.
Is crystal meth the modern-day moonshine?
What we ought to be doing with regard to methamphetamine is we ought to be engaged in a real educational campaign to tell people just how dangerous methamphetamine is.
Don't you think the drug war could be kind of held responsible for the fact that meth has become so popular, the fact that it's harder to get cocaine into the United States because of the drug war? Now we're giving a rise to synthetic drugs?
No. These guys will use any drug they can get. That has no bearing on it.
Can I ask them, who would rather do cocaine or speed?
Tweak.
Speed.
Meth.
Speed.
I'd rather tweak.
You guys do speed?
Why do I think it's become so popular? It keeps you going. You can work a long time. You can stay awake. Have great sex.
What's the come down like?
What's it come down like? I don't know. I never came down.
Heroin makes you nod and get in traffic accidents. Marijuana makes you sit on your couch, and speed puts you in the fast lane.
That's your opinion.
And as governor of the state of New Mexico, half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend in the courts, and half of what we spend in the prisons is drug-related.
Self-made millionaire Gary Johnson shocked the citizens of New Mexico when, after being re-elected to a second term, denounced the drug war and tried tirelessly to introduce harm reduction strategies.
Former Governor Gary Johnson's in this film.
Who's he? What?
He was the governor of New Mexico, trying to legalize drugs for 8 years.
Oh yeah, that's why he's not the governor anymore.
Well, he was 8 years. But what do you think about him? What do you think would happen to America if drugs were legal?
Well, you know, that guy, in fact, if I knew he was going to be on your camera, I probably wouldn't even be talking to you. Because that's a defeatist attitude, this guy. That's right, New Mexico. You should never have a defeatist attitude and give up because you say you can't solve a problem. So let's give up on bank robberies and let's make everything legal.
The way I look at it basically is that we have gotten to where we've gotten today, and I think it's because of politicians, and drugs have become the easy boogeyman to put all blame on.
I'm the only politician, if you want to call me that will tell it like it is.
The judge ordered me to go to treatment, and I'm not able to go to treatment, so this is what I'm getting instead. Chain gang and county jail.
Are you afraid you're going to fall back into it when you get out?
I'm afraid I may if I don't get into a drug rehab right away, like within the first 12 hours of my release.
Are we going to ever eliminate methamphetamine use? No. But can we reduce it? Yes, and we can do that through education. But that doesn't have to include locking people up for its use.
When you look at 2 million people in prisons and jails across the nation, about 60% are in there for drugs or drug-related crime.
And when it comes to federal prisons, I know that number is much higher because of federal mandatory sentencing.
This isn't a prison. This is a jail. The prisons are the country clubs. That's where some of these guys could end up. And I'm sure anybody been to the Department of Corrections? Which one you like better? Here, the jails, or the state prison? What? See? These guys plead guilty quick so they can get to prison.
I was raised believing that incarceration was expensive to the taxpayer. It was not in anyone's best interest to lock someone in a cage unless it was absolutely necessary. In the mid-1980s, a law was passed that allowed privately owned corporations to build and operate prisons.
I'm a real advocate of private prisons, having privatized half the prisons in New Mexico. And the reason for doing that is the same goods, same services at a third less the price.
Have we reached a point of building so many prisons that the purveyors are now looking for ways to keep them all full?
Here's the way a private prison works, okay? You pay somebody to build a fancy cage. Then you fill it up as far as you can get it, which is pretty full. Full of people that the people that built the cage get paid $40,000 or $50,000 a year to just keep in the cage.
You have corporations like Wackenhut, they just changed their name, Corrections Corporation of America, that house prisoners, nonviolent drug offenders. As a matter of fact, I think 60% of the increase in prison population under Bill Clinton, which was like 1 million people, of the 60% of that new prison population are nonviolent drug offenders.
Now, if you've got 5,000 people in your cage and you're being paid $30,000, $40,000 a year for them, that's a lot of money. And if you can, on top of that, use them as your private property, as chattel property, that you can then make do work or make produce things that you get paid for on top of that, what a great deal. Now, where I come from, when you transform a person into a piece of property, that's called slavery.
Not far from Bakersfield, California is the small town of Taft, once home to a thriving oil industry. But like so many oil towns across America, the oil finally dried up. Like many bankrupt towns, a private prison stepped in to save the day. The Taft Correctional Institution is owned by the G.E.A. Group, formerly known as Wackenhut. Wackenhut changed its name after a storm of bad publicity.
The G.E.A. Group is the leader in providing diversified services to government agencies around the globe. Our global expertise in outsourcing includes the design, construction, financing, management, and operation of jails, prisons, and special purpose institutions, and immigration and detention centers.
They trade their stock on Wall Street based upon the number of people that are in jail. If that isn't sick, if that isn't the best definition of sickness in a society, in a culture, in a civilization, I can't tell you what is.
Serving time in the Taft Federal Prison is actor-comedian Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong. Trying to get into the privately owned prison to interview Tommy was not unlike dealing with any other major corporation. Months went by as they kept asking me to jump through endless hoops, and if I didn't know any better, I could swear they were doing everything possible to get rid of me. But Tommy wasn't just an icon of drugs. Sitting in prison, he was now a symbol of things to come with the new conservative fever sweeping the nation following 9/11.
That transmitter on the ground, Trick. Now, you guys are from Texas, sir?
Yes, Austin, Texas.
Austin? Oh, no wonder. Old Willie Town, huh?
Tommy Chong arrested for pot, right? No. Tommy was targeted by former Attorney General John Ashcroft, whose Operation Pipe Dreams entrapped the 65-year-old actor. Tommy's son was using his dad's face to sell bongs on the internet and was baited into shipping a glass pipe to a county that prohibits them. In his attempt to shut down the paraphernalia industry and send a message to Hollywood, John Ashcroft made an example out of Tommy, proving that even a rich movie star is not untouchable for the DEA.
I'm Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong. It's like a royal title. The privatized prison business is big. It's a slave labor market. We get these little jobs and we get like $15 a month, low end. It provides employment for depressed rural areas. So you get a place like Taft, you know. If it wasn't for the prison, there would be no industry here. You know, the oil industry is gone, long gone. There's nothing else here, you know, except maybe the ground squirrel industry. Conviction rate is almost 100%. And people that are doing the longest time here are the ones that had a strategy, that went to court and fought it and lost. You know what it did? I'll tell you what it did. It made me feel like a black guy.
Tulia was, for a long time, just another crummy little town in West Texas. And it's treated black people and Hispanic people in a real crummy way for a long time. It's not any different than towns throughout the South and probably in the Midwest. It's got a large church-going population. It's got a very tight-knit community of white people, and it's got a small outside community that's not even really a community of marginalized black and brown people.
I'm kind of the chief redneck out here because I am kind of prejudiced, and I admit it, and everybody is. You know, I'm not unique. I am unique in that I understand who I am and attempt to control that, which Christians are supposed to do. But any guy that puts his pants on one leg at a time and says he's not prejudiced, I say, come with me and I'll take you someplace and show you some people that you will be scared on your first impression.
Civil rights attorney Jeff Blackburn witnessed how the lure of lucrative drug war funding enticed an entire police force to make illegal arrests.
All of a sudden, overnight, there was this massive roundup, well-publicized, put all over the TV stations, where 1/10 of the town's black population was escorted in handcuffs to jail. We were told that this was the most massive rural drug conspiracy ever uncovered in West Texas, that it was due to the sterling police work of an individual cop named Tom Coleman, who was a hero. The Tulia newspaper ran, not an editorial, I'm sorry, it was a news story that was headlined, "Tulia Streets Cleared of Garbage."
When all the major media sources, including 60 Minutes, covered the Tulia story, they told of a lone redneck cop by the name of Tom Coleman who hated black people. But who was Tom Coleman working for? When you followed the trail of money, he was merely a pawn of a law enforcement policy that profits from making large arrests.
So there was this thunderclap arrest and sweep of the black community. It landed 46 people in jail, nearly all of whom were black. Then, of course, they quickly started getting processed through the system with court-appointed lawyers, with all-white jurors, and we begin to get sentences like 99, 75, 320 years, out of control, over the top, Texas, typical small town sentences for drug dealers.
Yeah, I sat in jail for 5 months before my lawyer even came to see me. He told me, he said, only thing you can do for me, give me 25 to 99.
In the olden days, you had legal lynching. This was legal lynching on a whole new level. This was ethnic cleansing combined with the need to get grant money.
The problem in Tulia, and the problem with most of the task forces in the state of Texas, they're created as an entity, as a corporation that more or less stands alone. It's not in the chain of command of DPS or any state agency.
It's tempting to think of Tulia as just some rural, weird remnant of the distant Deep South past. The truth is, Tulia is the cutting edge of modern drug law enforcement.
And you got this task force out here operating like a pit bulldog or a Rottweiler that's supposed to be on kind of a leash, but it's running all over town trying to find any kid it can to bite.
Yeah, I know I was singled out because I was black, black guy, and the Spanish and the black, we in big, big trouble.
Sergeant Lou Daigle receives a call about a naked guy walking into a restaurant and putting ice up his butt.
311 man is a man with no clothes on or exposing himself.
2029, Roger.
He's on PCP. PCP? It's pretty bad.
The name Sherm comes from people dipping Sherman cigarettes into vials of PCP.
It bothers me to no end that so many young people are on Sherm now.
Hey, Sherm was one of the worst drugs that I ever seen in my life. Seeing somebody that used Sherm.
Since 9/11, the only thing that's really changed around here in my neighborhood are the attitudes of the police. You know, the gangs are now the new terrorists.
I mean, how tough security's gotten since 9/11, it's like really like, how the drugs coming into the United States now. How? I mean, I don't have an airplane, I don't have a car that's gonna make it with California plates to Mexico and back to Colombia. I can't even drive to Colombia. I don't have a boat.
It gotta be flown or shipped.
There's a great line in the movie Boys in the Hood where Larry Fishburne is saying, hey man, we don't grow it. We don't own any airplanes. We don't have any laboratories. How does it get here? Why does it get here? And that's a very good common sense approach that intuitively the people in South Central understood, that there was something much bigger than them that was moving the whole drug issue and the drug war.
My parents were staunch Republicans. Back in the 80s, the big concern was not terrorism, it was communism. The Iran-Contra affair was one of the biggest political scandals in U.S. history. Members of the Reagan administration, headed by Oliver North, engaged in the sale of arms to Iran. The proceeds from these illegal deals were being used to fund the Contras, a right-wing guerrilla group that Reagan referred to as his freedom fighters. The Contras were fighting the Soviet-backed Sandinistas for the domination of Nicaragua.
The Iran-Contra is very important in history. We have to remember the fact that Iran-Contra, its mandate was to investigate the sales of missiles to Iran.
Former D.E.A. agent Celerino Castillo not only fought in the international effort of the American drug war, he also had the rare opportunity of carrying a camera and recording some of the regrettable actions of the D.E.A. and CIA while they supported President Reagan and Oliver North's Contra movement.
George Bush Sr. came to Guatemala on January 13, 1986. And he approached me and asked me what I did there at the U.S. Embassy, what my job description was. And I told him I was a DEA agent working
international narcotics investigations, and I told them, look, you know, we have gathered intelligence that the Contras are involved in drug trafficking down in El Salvador. And then he just smiled, shook my hand, and walked away from me. And it was then and there that I knew that my government knew that these atrocities were occurring.
They were so concerned about giving the guns to Iran and all that stuff. The question should have been asked about all that cocaine flying back over here.
In 1986, on American TV, we were all being fed a steady diet of,
we're taking down the surrender flag that has flown over so many drug efforts. We're running up a battle flag.
this scourge will stop. But regrettably, back in Central America and in the jungle,
I remember down in Central America, we were refueling planes full of cocaine coming into the U.S., and it was a CIA operation being run by the White House.
At the same time all of the cocaine from Nicaragua was flowing into the U.S., Freeway Ricky Ross was at his heyday.
The average week would at least be $2 to $3 million, almost guaranteed. Some days we would have $2 and $3 million days.
After Freeway Rick was arrested, an investigative journalist by the name of Gary Webb uncovered a link that connected him back to the Nicaraguan Contra movement.
So I read Dark Alliance. I got a copy personally from Gary Webb himself. And to read the book, it was fascinating for me, you know, to find out that I was connected with the CIA and all these high-powered people up in the government.
Ricky Ross was just lucky. He just happened to get a source who was connected to the CIA.
For a long time in South Central, the buzzword was that the CIA was selling crack. I said, no, the CIA wasn't selling crack. The CIA was importing cocaine. Ricky Ross got it, turned it into crack, and he sold it.
According to Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, when Danilo Blandón was displaced from his home country of Nicaragua, he set off to America to raise money to aid the Contras in ridding his home from the invading Sandinistas. When Ricky Ross was introduced to Blandón, Blandón was in a position to create a pipeline of cocaine that he in turn gave to Ricky Ross on consignment.
Which I like the sound of that, you know, because I was always trying to get to the top anyway.
Suddenly, some major sources opened up for him. Danilo Blandón, Norwin Meneses, both of whom were tied to the CIA and the Contras, and Gary Webb did a masterful job of breaking those stories and proving with documents that that was the case.
Whatever we were running in LA, the profit was going to the Contra Revolution.
I started doing a little research on my own, and I read a little bit about Oliver North and the Contras, because I never knew what the Contras was before.
There's ledgers of Oliver North and them actually transporting the cocaine to our country. There's film. Every piece of document that's possible.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. First-time dealer and former Crip Leroy Chico Brown was arrested with Rick. Chico walked into a DEA sting operation that was set up to capture and imprison Rick and trade for Rick's old partner, Danilo Blandón.
How could this be possible? And we reading through the documents, and then that's when Gary Webb started explaining it to us, and we was like, everything came together now.
One of the most paramount moments, perhaps caused by Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, took place in November of 1996.
It was a monumental historic event. I mean, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency was coming to Watts to face the people.
Now, we all know that the U.S. government and the CIA supported the Contras in their efforts to overthrow the Sandinista government in Nicaragua in the middle 80s. Now, it is alleged that the CIA also helped the Contras raise money for arms by introducing crack cocaine into California.
Deutsch felt he had to do something to try to deal with the outrage that was foaming all over the country at the time. And of course, it just blew up in his face.
CIA fights drugs. CIA does not encourage drugs.
Well, I mean, it was actually one of the most monumental blunders of all time, if you think about it.
We have no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America.
Deutsch was there because of the Gary Webb stories. The Gary Webb stories had sparked a national furor.
I would like to have Richie Ross's brother to speak, please.
The United States government turned their head and let this cocaine come into the United States of America.
allowed Gary Webb to have full access. This whole thing is orchestrated.
It was near pandemonium. It was about, I guess, 1,200 people in a standing room only in the auditorium, 2,000 people outside listening on loudspeakers. And it was very hard to keep control. I got called on finally, and I said to her very clearly, I was looking right at Deutsch.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I worked South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, and the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
I was able to name operations.
Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country.
He stumbled and stammered and wrung his hands.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department.
And of course my response was, I started there 18 years ago, sir, and they tried to kill me. Now what do you want me to do?
If this information turns up wrongdoing, we will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
The crowd started chanting, "We told you, we told you, we told you." And it was a great moment of unity. And it was a healing moment for me, because I'd been out alone for 18 years and didn't really know that kind of support was there for me either. The average person in South Central Los Angeles did not know anything about really how the CIA worked. They had an intuitive sense.
If you have a private network run by George Bush and Ollie North, not the CIA, you won't find the records in the CIA. They're not there. They're in these privatized intelligence agencies. Will you pursue that? Will you pursue Ollie North and George Bush and the massive documentation? All these gentlemen, like this gentleman here, the co-defendant of Ricky Ross.
They needed the money to finance the war in Nicaragua. They had the link. We know that from records now that they sent Blandon, who was a CIA operative, CIA, to school for marketing the product, which we now know is cocaine.
Me and Ricky Ross is waiting to get sentenced Tuesday. And what a judge gonna say to us come Tuesday?
May I just say that the question which was asked of us by the judge was Ricky Ross ever an agent or a contract employee?
I already knew that from the beginning of dealing with Danilo Blandon that he was sending supplies and things of that nature, computers and guns to Nicaragua to fight a war.
Ricky had already served a 5.5-year sentence for dealing crack, but was now given a second 20-year sentence after being set up by his former partner Blandon, while Oliver North walked away as a hero, wealthy and free to try his hand at politics.
Oliver North was being promoted by the Christian Coalition, and to them he was the last white hope that they were going to have for a right-wing Christian to run for U.S. Senate in Virginia.
During the 1986 Kerry Commission, Oliver North's crimes were exposed to the American public, and yet today Oliver North is not only a free man, he has his own show on the Fox News network.
It's amazing that Oliver North has his own TV show, and hopefully when I get out, I plan on having my own.
How does a federal agency like the CIA exert control over local law enforcement agencies?
The way it's done, which I saw firsthand at LAPD, there are networks called the Narcotics Intelligence Network, or now it's called Clearinghouse, where agencies who are doing a drug case don't step on each other's toes.
Every time the police go invade us, I know Rick used to get calls and say, move out, they coming.
We actually saw that here in 1986 with major task force investigations of Freeway Ricky Ross. They had search warrants for 19 locations that were prepared one night, and by the time they got there the next morning, all 16 locations had been cleared out. And that means that obviously there was a leak. That's the way the CIA protects its share of the drug trade.
Just one night, I got a tip from Danilo not to go over, and just so happened to be the night that they raided.
The United States Sentencing Guidelines and the federal sentencing
system rewards those who get others involved in criminal conduct. And that's what Blandone did.
During the exact same period that Freeway Ricky Ross was at his heyday, home values in South Central Los Angeles were tanking. People owed $100,000 on their home. The place was a war zone, dead bodies in the backyard, prostitutes in the front, drive-by shooting. I mean, it was horrible. And people walked on their mortgages because they couldn't sell the houses. And tens of thousands of homes were moved, literally for 10 and 20 cents on the dollar after people abandoned their mortgages. We call that ethnic cleansing.
There was a greater plan to put churches, to put liquor stores, gun shops, and cocaine, drugs, into the ghetto, into the neighborhoods, and drive the prices down. And they pretty much did a good job of that.
Real estate in California, which we consider Compton, Watts, East LA, South Central, where the drug-infested gang killing highest rates in the country, and families really start moving out of the inner cities to way out. I'm talking about 70 miles out of LA to get rid of. I'm talking about the farmland where they promising people that they gonna build up jobs and everything. Especially like in the 80s. This is a big thing about moving to Moreno Valley. We're gonna have all these big corporations come in. It never happened. People actually moved out there, end up losing everything because the big corporations never came. And then a lot of investors came back here and start buying property for so cheap prices. And now the property value is sky high. You can't even afford to live in Compton and Washington without spending $300,000 for a home that my mother then paid $9,000 for.
I think the prevailing view on Wall Street is anyone stupid enough to buy drugs deserves to die. And if you can make money from them while they're doing it, that's great. And if that's imposing a crime wave on a community away from Wall Street, that's okay. There's no drug crime on Wall Street.
I don't like niggers. They pay cash, right? They pay cash.
One of the important facets of the discussion should be what I call conspiracy theories. There are lots of folks out there, and there are books written on this by people who are in a position to know. Former D.E.A. agents, former CIA operatives, things like that. And they tell stories about huge amounts of money, large-scale corruption in the big parts of government, etc. And are these stories true? And the answer is, of course, I don't know. I don't have access to any particular information more than anyone else does. However, ask yourself this question. If you're going to have $1 million in cash, how much corruption can you buy at any level for that $1 million? And the answer has to be quite a bit.
On December 10th, 2004, investigative journalist Gary Webb was found shot in his apartment.
No. You lying.
No.
When?
Saturday.
Oh, man.
The internet was set ablaze with conspiracies of a CIA assassination plot, but overwhelming evidence of a suicide soon put the theories to rest.
Well, he used to tell me that he would come home at night and there'd be guys, climbing up the pole late at night, 12 and 1 o'clock, at nighttime, and people following him around everywhere he goes. He has cars telling him, and his phone was tapped. And he was just saying that they were kind of like giving him the blues. A lot of things were going on that he didn't really like. And he said it was the government, too.
By the way, the head of the DEA, his name is Rob Bonner, who's a friend of mine throughout the first George Bush administration, documented that yes, the CIA was involved with importation of a fair amount of cocaine with regard to the Iran-Contra, etc. But it just has to happen because of the money.
We understand what you're saying.
Okay, I'm back now, and I'll go ahead and pause this here. And I just want you people to know that I wanted Negro, colored, black, African Americans, and all people to understand the horrible things that we as Negroes went through and still go to this day. And I'm playing this on my tablet, and I'm going to play something else for you in a moment. And if you people have YouTube, or if you have Netflix, if you have that, or Hulu, then you people can look the rest up and see for yourself. And if not, I'll sometime in the future play that again. And I want to play something for you about conspiracy, and to show you how the con game is being ran on America and the whole world. And so that 9/11 scam that's running right now, and I just want you people out there to hear a little bit about that before the show goes off. And I think that'll be coming back up in just a moment.
What is actually happening in this country is it's being taken apart. I use an expression which is, why does nothing work anymore? If you look out the window and you look at what's happening in society, nothing works. Schools, hospitals, transport, police. I mean, we've got a situation today in this country where the mainstream media is just not getting the truth across. We're not told the truth about the EU, we're not told the truth about the rioting that's been happening in European countries, we're not told about the troubles in Iceland. Nobody explains where Gordon Brown's got 900 billion from.
It was like a cruise missile with wings, went right there and slammed right into the Pentagon. Huge explosion, great ball of fire, smoke started billowing out.
Shortly after September 11th, as what usually happens, many conspiracy theories began to emerge as to what really happened on September 11th of 2001. And because many of these theories were not grounded with any evidence, we didn't really pay too much attention to them. However, in February of 2002, my attention was drawn to the following website, entitled Hunt the Boeing, Test Your Perceptions. Now, the original website was completely in French and was released by the French and drew some very serious questions as to what had really happened at the Pentagon. I mean, after all, we had all seen the big hole that was created by the 757 that had slammed into the Pentagon at 9:43 on September 11th. But some of the photographs that were shown on this website raised very serious questions as to whether or not that's exactly what had happened. Some of these photographs showed a smaller hole, and in some cases showed that there was no way that a 757 could have created this damage. So we began our own investigation, and that started by taking a look at some of the magazines that we all saw at the supermarket checkout stands shortly after the events of September 11th. As I began pouring through the photographs, I had one goal in mind, and that was to prove the French wrong with their website, Hunt the Boeing. After all, there must have been some photographic evidence that showed that a 757 had hit the Pentagon. But as we went through all these photographs, we could find no pictures whatsoever showing a tail, a nose, a fuselage, wings, engine, wheels, luggage, seats, nothing. There were no photographs showing any recognizable wreckage from a 757. Furthermore, when you look at the size of the hole at the Pentagon, it was approximately 65 feet across, and the height of the Pentagon is approximately 73 feet. From wingtip to wingtip, a 757 is 124 feet 10 inches. From nose to tail, a 757 is 155 feet and 3 inches in length, and the height is 44 feet and 6 inches. However, when you look at the hole at the Pentagon, you'll find that it's only approximately 65 feet across. How does a plane of those dimensions fit into a hole only 65 feet across? Upon further inspection, we found that the damage at the Pentagon was completely and totally inconsistent with the damage of the planes that had hit the World Trade Center. I mean, after all, the planes that hit the Trade Center created a fire so intense that it fatigued the steel and collapse the buildings, or so that's what we were told. And yet, when you look at the left side of the Pentagon, you'll note that there is very little, if any, smoke damage or heat damage at all. On the third floor, it's very plain to see a file cabinet with a computer monitor. Neither of them are damaged. On the second floor, you can see a wooden desk. It hasn't burned. And on the first floor, a very curious sight indeed, a wooden stool with a book that is laying and open. The pages aren't even singed. Now, each of the planes involved in the September 11th attacks had embarked upon transcontinental flights, which means that they had a majority of their fuel left over when they hit their respective targets. That means that approximately 8,600 remaining gallons of fuel would have been ignited on the 757 that had hit the Pentagon. Again, we look at the photograph and ask ourselves, is the smoke and heat damage consistent with that amount of fuel being ignited?
Well, William, I mean, that's incredibly powerful, isn't it? That I'm sure you recognize that piece of your film, even though you can't see it with us. When you found these images and looked at these facts, I mean, did you feel that you had a kind of moral duty to make this film? Is that the thinking behind it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we tell people, don't worry about copyrights. Just get this thing and make copies of it in your DVD player and get it out to other people. And really, I think that's how the message began to spread so quickly. We had reports back from some people that had made literally hundreds of thousands of copies that they were giving out for free. So we were thrilled to find out that this information was getting out to people. I don't think the American people quite get it, that this September 11th terrorist attacks have been used to lull the American people into a sense of fear and fright, and we've got to act, we've got to do something, and they've been tricked into going to war in other countries. First strike wars, where we're the aggressor, we're the people going in, starting this stuff, I don't believe the American people really and truly understand that we're not looked upon very favorably around the world, and the whole excuse that's being used to trick the American people is this episode of 911.
Explanation for what we just saw. Could it have been a 757 jetliner loaded up with passengers, loaded up with fuel, with jet engines that are 9 or so feet across, hitting that building?
It's very unlikely, to put it lightly. There's no, as we saw in the video, there's no marks. The width of the hole was at most 90 feet wide, and a 757 is 125.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and stop this and put me on camera 3, and I'll stop this, and we're down to the 3-minute mark, and I'll have a few minutes to talk to you, one of the people out there in TV land, and I'm Cecil Hatchett with Poe Folk Community for Justice, and I want you wonderful people to understand that there's serious issues going on to this day in 2016 that America has been responsible for around the world. I was going to play a part of it talking about common purpose. There's a lot of people right now taking classes for common purpose, and they're people supposed to get in the to become city offices or city jobs so they can start helping to mold people's minds the way to think. And they buy into it because they buy into the 9/11 con, and we all know, at least all the people that I'm speaking to out there in TV land, know the truth, that there was no people with box cutters that brought the Twin Towers down with the box cutters, 19 people, and we know that there were explosives set off, and the buildings came down under the, because the bottoms were all blown out of those Twin Towers and Building 7, and the 46-story building, which was up there with the Twin Towers. And when I speak about the African-American man, Negro, colored, black African-American, who was murdered or killed because he spoke regarding all the explosions, but a lot of firemen and policemen spoke regarding the fire and the bombs that was exploding or igniting and going off, but nobody's never done nothing about it in America. We sold all the metal to China and try to clean the mess up as quickly as possible, and many people are suffering to this day. And then we went to Afghanistan and killed all the people, but Afghanistan is another country that the poppy industry was about to come alive again. So America again is back in the drug war, or basically involved in drugs again. And that would be the whole purpose of trying to get the war going, because they had a personal interest in maintaining their richness and tricking people into moving on the other country and blowing up over 3 million people. And when you got poor people and they become terrorists, the only reason they become really freedom fighters and not terrorists, but become freedom fighters because their property, their land has been destroyed, and they have no alternatives but to go that route. Okay. Thank you, Brother Ron. In God Almighty we trust. Stay blessed, and we'll see you next Sunday.